Welcome back to 7:30, Kim Beazley.
Oh, that's a nice sense of deja vu I'm getting.
Deja vu all over again.
Yeah.
Taxpayers are spending $500 million on expanding the Australian War Memorial, but our other national cultural institutions have faced sustained funding cuts. This reflects the very powerful place that war holds in our national story, doesn't it?
Well, certainly the war and the War Memorial, I have to say. It is commemoration, as you pointed out. It's memory. It is our sense of ourselves. It's not the total picture, but it's a very big part of it. And it is a great institution. It's the best of its kind globally. And it's, of course, constantly experiencing a requirement to expand, because we get committed to conflicts, we get committed to humanitarian missions, we get committed to peacekeeping. And so there is always going to be need for more gallery space and other commemorative spaces, and standards and change through time. We've got more than ample justification, I think, to be doing what we're doing.
Sure. Critics of the expansion, though, say it's undermining the role of the memorial as a shrine, and it's turning it into a theme park. Do we need to look at planes and trucks to remember those who served in war?
It's not remotely a theme park. The sacred centre of it, of course, which is still available, much of the rest of it's been cut out from public view because we're going through that reconstruction. But that central part, the pool of reflection, hall of memory, tomb of the unknown soldier, roll of honour around the walls. Since the first time I can recollect going there, I always had a sense that it was a sacred place. And it is, apart from the sacred spaces of the First Nations people in this country, it is arguably the most sacred space we have here in Australia. There'll be objectors to that, but for me it is. And it is part of a promise. We've made a promise to the people who went away in World War I and to wars ever since, that they will never be forgotten. And if you look at the totality of the memorial, but particularly that central feature, it's a keeping of that promise. And that promise is important for many reasons. One, it's important for honour, but it is also important for our ability to marshal a sense of purpose and commitment to the nation when the nation faces crises. We are now in a situation, I think, arguably worse than we've ever experienced since World War II. And every bit of self-strengthening that we can get, we need to get.
Well, given that sacred role and given the role of war in our national story, do you find it strange that Australia generally seems to have such a lack of interest in or education about the frontier wars, which occurred across Australia for at least a century? And what should be the role of the War Memorial in addressing that?
It should be in it. And it is. People quite unfairly accuse it of taking absolutely no notice of all of that. In fact, since 1985, they have been. And there is the largest picture in a museum, a part of the memorial of pictures, is in fact a work done by Aboriginal folk from nations in Central Australia.
With respect, Mr.
Beazley, protecting country.
Yes, with respect, that's really, and there's a video accompanying that which shows that it's about Indigenous people's role in other wars. It's not about the conflict between Indigenous Australians and white Australians. There's just one small painting about that. There has been talk about a much broader and deeper depiction of the frontier wars in the future. Yes. How much of the expansion of the memorial will actually be dedicated to that?
Well, they will start the memorial with a pre-Federation Wars collection, and obviously one of the most critical elements of that is going to be the part that is devoted to frontier wars. Look, I think it's enormously important that we do that. It's enormously important that that gets acknowledged. They went on for a lot longer than a century. They really started in 1788, and there was petering out in the Northern Territory in the 1930s. The great Australian silence that was referred to by one anthropologist was not a silence of the 19th century. It was a silence of the 20th century. It was in the 19th century, all Australian settlers knew everything about frontier wars. They were actively involved, they had actively demonstrated fear of it, organised themselves to be participants in it, and of course committed some horrendous massacres. And that is got to be, or the conflict element of that has got to be represented in that memorial. But it's not enough. And we need to get this into the head of Australians. If you think about what was said by the statement from the heart, they want truth-telling. And the truth-telling has to be done around the country. And because it's sorry business, we can't actually put up there ourselves, but we ought to facilitate it for Aboriginals who want to remember massacres.
Sure. Just on the War Memorial itself, though, there's been estimates made that there's 27,000 metres of new space in the expansion of the gallery. The pre-colonial gallery, which includes the Frontier Wars, will be less than 2% of that. Is that sufficient?
I think you will find that it is very substantial when it is opened and we all get a chance to see it. There's an awful lot that memorial covers, and as I said, that if this is all there is going to be in terms of memorial, if you like, in Australia, then that is totally inadequate. There actually has to be much more than that, but that is not the responsibility of the War Memorial. They must do their bit, and I think it will elevate the Frontier Wars in the public consciousness massively. It'll be the first thing they see when they come to contemplate the War Memorial. But we need to have that recognition around the country. And that is, we've got to enter an era of truth-telling, and that has got to be part of it.
Kim Beazley, thanks so much for your time tonight.
Thank you, Laura.